that everybody can hear.
Check.
Okay. Check. Check.
There we go.
Okay, look at this turnout. Woo!
Get started.
We need everybody to the front. Everybody, fill us in. Fill us in. And we're not going to scan the room. Oh my goodness. I know. Well, this is gonna be recorded, so we're gonna have a really great recording. Students. Sorry, I'm so sorry. Students, come forward, please.
Did you say kiddos?
I did. I know. I'm so sorry. I teach preschool, so that's where that's coming from. Yeah. We're not live, right?
Yes.
Oh, we are. We're live. Okay.
Wow.
Am I good right here, Mike?
Yep.
Okay. Great. Well, so my name is Rebecca Seaton, and I am a Connor parent, and I'm also a proud member of the Community of Concern, which is hosting this program tonight. We are parents of high school and middle school students, and we work on engaging people in events and initiatives that raise awareness and educate about youth mental health and wellness through an equity and inclusion lens. And we are here tonight to talk about youth substance use and prevention, really important topic. Just quickly, I think everybody knows the bathrooms are that way and to the right if you need to use that. And we also want to thank West Hartford Community Interactive for live streaming and recording our program tonight. And we'll be able to share the recording with people in our PTO newsletters, our email list, and on our website. So before we start the presentation, I just want to recognize that we have some people in the room who are from agencies that work with youth substance use and mental wellness. And just to wave so that we know who you are, Susan Sarmiento is from the Governor's Partnership Prevention. And Paul Brainerd is from NAME, the National Alliance for Mental Illness. And David Behringer is from the Wheeler Clinic. And Kelly Waterhouse is from the town social services working with youth. So we're really excited you are here. And we have a wonderful turnout of students with us tonight. We're so excited to have you here because your perspective on this topic is critical, because this is about you and your lives. So we're happy to have you here. And I just wanted to mention that earlier today, I was at a Safe School and Climate Committee meeting at Conard with some students, and we asked them about their tips and advice for parents around this topic. And they said 3 things. They said parents should model appropriate behavior around substances. Don't be hypocrites. They said that punishment is not the way to go. Find out what's going on with your kids. And they said, teach them healthy strategies to deal with stress. Right? So I said, could you come do this presentation tonight? But I know that what you all have to say as students is really important. So with that, I'm going to introduce our presenter. Tonight we have Chris Dutton here. Chris is a licensed clinical social worker. He is the director of the clinical director of Community and School Services at the Bridge Family Center. Chris and his team do valuable work for youth and families in West Hartford. So Chris is going to present, and then we'll have some discussions, and then we'll take off. So Chris, take it away.
Great. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay, good. So, like Rebecca said, my name is Chris Dutton. I'm the Clinical Director of Community and School Services at the Bridge here in town. I'm excited to be talking about this topic. It's a really important topic, which is really how do you talk to, or be aware of, and talk to youth kids, teenagers, about drug and alcohol use. The basis of the presentation comes from an organization called Courage to Speak, which has put together a pretty good, pretty comprehensive overview of kind of the substances that are available to youth in our community. And then, you know, I think the bulk and the really most important part here is how do you talk to kids about substances? And so let's kind of dive right in. So the concept here really is imploring parents to be courageous parents. And courageous parents are aware of what kids are being exposed to and educate themselves and communicate with their children about the dangers of drug and alcohol use. They also teach their children how to manage their emotions, and they set limits, rules, and consequences for them, right? And I think sometimes parents want really to be liked, they want to be friendly, they want to be cool, they want to be connected, and all of those things are really, really important, but they all also have to take place in the context of a boundaried relationship, right? Because as parents, we are the sort of front line, or should be the front line in our kids' experiences with the world, and that includes substances. This presentation that's put together from Courage to Speak talks a lot about the opioid crisis because that's a real worry. And so we are going to talk about opiates and how they're available, but I'm going to kind of move through that sort of quickly, unless you have questions about it, to get into the real meat, which is how do you talk to kids. But we are, as many of you might know, in the midst of an opioid crisis in the United States. As you can see, over 1 million youth in America between the ages of 12 and 17 have used non-medical, or have reported rather, non-medical use of prescription drugs. Right? That's a lot of people. And typically speaking, when kids have access to prescription drugs, they're often, they're often opiates. Another kind of disheartening fact is that on average more than 130 Americans die every day from an opioid overdose. So opioids are drugs that act on the nervous system to relieve pain. Over time, people become dependent on them, and it can lead to withdrawal. So they're highly addictive and very difficult to quit, because as somebody tries to stop using, you have a lot of physical symptoms that cause a lot of discomfort and pain and make it very difficult to move on from opioid use. Kids often, or can often, get access to opioid drugs by way of prescription medication in the home that were not properly stored or properly disposed of, right? Most of us in this room have probably had some sort of a prescription for opioids after a bad car accident or after a dental procedure, whatnot. 83% of teens, according to an article in the Journal of Adolescent Health, have had unsupervised access to those medications at home. 2/3 of teens who have reported abuse of pain relievers say that they got them from family members and friends. Just in case you are not familiar with opioids, these are kind of the brand names and generic names of the most commonly available and misused drugs, right? So a lot of times you'll see oxycodone, that's OxyContin, Percocet. Again, dental procedures, accidents, they're really, really common. Hydrocodone. And then, of course, most of us have heard, because it's been in the news a lot, fentanyl. I don't want to go into a lot of detail about fentanyl. The main takeaway here is that it is extremely potent, and it becomes extremely deadly because it takes only a tiny, tiny amount to cause a catastrophic response in a person's body. It's also important to know that teens are sometimes or often receiving misinformation, right? Almost every adolescent has a friend that claims to be an expert on drugs and alcohol. I would say the message tends to be that drug and alcohol risks are minimal. That's not true. We all know that's not true. If you think about it, most teens probably know that's not true, but they have somebody that swears, oh, I've been using this for so long, no problem, no problem, no problem. You want your teenager to get that information from you, and you wanted to get them to get important, real information from you, and they need to trust you and believe you. The only way they're going to do that is if you have the right, accurate information, and also that you formed a relationship where you're talking about these things on a regular basis. We're probably all familiar with heroin as an opiate. Heroin is often snorted or smoked at first because people want to avoid needles. However, I think a lot of times you think, how does anybody go to injecting drugs? What happens is, over time, addiction sets in, tolerance sets in, and people start to experiment with other ways to take the drug, and the aversion to needles decreases. Part of the problem with people starting down this path by abusing prescription drugs is that it's very, very expensive, and heroin is not. Also, neither is fentanyl. Fentanyl is actually significantly, sort of pound for pound, dollar for dollar, less expensive than heroin. The return on investment, so to speak, for drug dealers for fentanyl is high because they can cut it a lot, and it's becoming more and more prevalent. We live in weird times when it comes to substances in the country and in the state of Connecticut. Because marijuana, cannabis, THC, pot, weed is legal in the state of Connecticut for people over the age of 21 for recreational use. That makes the conversation around pot more challenging with teenagers sometimes. Because, hey, if it's legal, it can't be that bad. The problem with using any substance is that it desensitizes you to the idea of a substance, right? We've talked historically about gateway drugs and things like that, and it's true that use can lead to other use. Part of that reason is around desensitization. But marijuana is out there. It's in the culture, it's in the conversation. It's now legal for adults to use in the state of Connecticut. It's important to know what is out there and how kids get it, so that you can have an open and honest, informed conversation with your teenager. One of the things that is important to remember as a parent about marijuana is that over the last 20, 30 years, it's become more and more and more potent, right? And so somebody can buy a vape product or an edible product at a dispensary right here in Connecticut with 80% or more THC concentration. Compared to, like the 70s and 80s, where, somebody would have, smoke a joint with 20%, 15%. It's very different. And so what happens is kids don't necessarily know how much of this substance that they're actually ingesting because they don't realize how powerful it is. And so what happens is there's a lot of psychoactive effects. Marijuana is linked to sort of connecting to mental health disorders as a result of being very high, disconnected from reality as a result of being high on marijuana. That's hugely risky for anyone who has a background or a family history of mental health disorders. Another issue particularly relevant right now in West Hartford is underage drinking. We know that alcohol is one of the most commonly used and abused substances by adolescents. Up to a third of high school students nationally report alcohol use in the last 30 days. That's a lot of teenagers. Up to 80% of adolescents will have experimented with alcohol by their senior year of high school. And we know that repeated alcohol exposure can alter the path of teen brain development. That's why alcohol is not legal until you're an adult, because it changes the architecture of your brain. We also know there have been studies that show that alcohol use prior to the age of 15 can increase the likelihood of adult alcoholism. So again, alcohol is one of those substances that is permeated in our culture. People talk about it a lot. I'm reminded of a time during COVID where it was kind of the thing to talk about, hey, everybody's drinking, everybody's doing this, right? It was very nonchalant. That changes the way that teenagers perceive, right? I think Rebecca said at the beginning, adults, we need to model responsible use of substances. Alcohol, it's legal. It's a substance we use. It's part of our culture. It's part of what we do. You go to a wedding, you have drinks, you do this, you do that. The problem is, as an adult, hopefully, we have good decision-making skills. We understand that you shouldn't have a drink and then go drive. We understand that you shouldn't drink to excess, etc., etc. Teenagers, by default, don't have good decision-making processes. They're learning how to solve problems. They're learning how to interpret what's happening and make good judgments. Alcohol impairs judgment to begin with, but then if they're watching us as adults have a very nonchalant attitude towards alcohol, they often may follow suit. Another big issue currently is vaping. Vaping is a really, really prevalent thing that I see right here in West Hartford on a regular basis, right? We've got kids that are vaping nicotine, and they don't even realize that they're addicted. I've had conversations with kids that they don't even know why they vape, but they also can't go a day without doing it. Hey guys, that's the same thing as being addicted to cigarettes. It just doesn't smell as bad. But we also know that it's really not good for your lungs. To make matters worse with vaping is that people also vape THC, right? And that's where that high concentration really causes havoc for the teenage brain, right? You can get a nicotine or a THC vape with upwards of 90% THC in it. That's like, I mean, I don't even really know what the comparison is because I'm not well versed in pot use myself, but I can tell you that it's not designed to sit and just puff on it all day. And unfortunately, that's what a lot of kids are doing. I've heard stories from kids, and you know, I'm working directly with the teenage population of kids that are standing in the bathroom at school, passing a vape pen around 2, 3, 4 times. That's a lot. And that's not great. That's at school. That's really not good. That's not great decision making. It's also really bad for brains. So, we also know that a lot of kids have access not to the legal vaping, but black market vape products, which have been linked to a lot of lung disease. It was big in the news 4, 5, 6 years ago. People were getting like vape lung and ending up in the hospital. We don't know enough about what's in the vapes. We don't know enough about what it does to our lungs long term for this to be considered a safe alternative. I think a lot of people think like, oh, vaping's not as bad as smoking, or it'll help me quit smoking, but it's still nicotine, it's still coming into your lungs, it's still heat, it's still foreign substances, it's not good. It's another conversation that parents need to be prepared to have with their kids. This next slide actually talks a little bit about the percentage of people as of 2017 who have reported vaping in the past month. E-cigarettes, vapes, whatever you want to call them, actually kind of hit the marketed anyways, as a way to reduce smoking. But what we know is that teens who vape are 4 times more likely to start smoking cigarettes. So why do kids use substances to begin with? Well, first of all, they're widely available if you go looking for them. And most adolescents at some point struggle with fitting in with peers, with the community, and even with their family. And that causes pain. It's difficult. So we know that kids often use because of stress from school and peer pressure. We know family pressure and emotional pain, the availability and transitions around fitting in all contribute to why somebody might pick up a substance of any kind. Drug abuse is linked very clearly with emotional pain. And emotional pain can be a lot of different things. It can be that stress that I was just talking about, but it can also be related to mental health conditions like depression or anxiety or others. And what happens is that often we don't want to deal with that. And so we look for escapes. We look for ways to have things be reduced or eased. The problem is it doesn't make anything go away, right? And it just continues and continues and continues. And so this, I'm just going to relax with a little pot, or I'm just going to have a little alcohol, just going to relax, ease my stress for a little while. Over time, for some people, that turns into addiction or significant abuse. We also know that the human brain is not fully developed until a person's in their mid-20s. And the area of the brain that controls executive functioning, which includes weighing long-term consequences and controlling impulse, is really among the last parts of the brain to develop and mature. Which means teen brains are more vulnerable to starting to use drugs, and using drugs can impact that development long term. There's also been studies that show that if teens don't use drugs and alcohol during adolescence, they're more unlikely to develop drug problems later in life. So as a parent, all that background information is really important because you need to be able to talk about those things with your kids, but you also need to be aware of what are signs that somebody might be starting to use. Particularly starting to use it in a more regular way, right? So you're looking for decreased involvement or talkativeness at home. Changes in friend group. Maybe your teenager had a friend group that they brought around home a lot, and now they're hanging with new kids, but they never come over. Why not? Where are they hiding? Maybe nothing. Maybe they're hiding use. Ask about it. Talk about it. Increased isolation, acting disconnected or spacey, loss of motivation, particularly for previously enjoyed activities, right? If your child used to love riding their bike, used to love going to the park, used to love being active, and now they just can't be bothered, that's a warning sign. Ask about it. Increased need for money. What are you buying? Why do you need all that money? You're not bringing home anything, right? Your child asks you for $50 because they want to go to the movies and get an ice cream afterwards, and you know that that's what they're doing because you're also down in the center and you see them. Great. Or they say, hey, I really want to buy this new record. I don't know, teens buy records, not as much. I want to buy this new whatever, this new video game, right? Okay, where's the video game? There it is. Hey, Mom, can I borrow $50? I want to buy this game. Sure, here's the $50. Where's the game? What are you buying? Why do you need all this money? ask the question. Defensiveness, secretiveness, irritability, lying, these are all warning signs as well. You also might notice physical signs and signs at school, right? So energy levels, particularly very, very high fluctuating energy levels, right? So you've got periods of very high energy coupled with periods of very low energy. Ask the question. Dramatic changes in sleep patterns or changes in appetite or weight. Mention of suicide. At school, they might have problems with learning, memory, and attention. Might show a drop in grades or drop in interest in school activities. Again, very involved kid, plays sports, after school activities, and then all of a sudden they just don't want to do any of those things. They don't want to do those things because they want to get a job, because they want to save money to buy a car. Great! They don't want to do any of those things and then they're just at home, or they're just going to the park, or they're just walking around. Not so great. Ask the question. The other piece about being a parent, besides being knowledgeable and paying attention and being connected, is sending the right message and being emotionally connected, right? One of the most important jobs of being a parent is emotional management, right? When your child is unhappy or you sense that they're unhappy, it's really, really important to talk about it. Try to get at the heart of the issue. Don't try to avoid it. Don't try to just gloss it over. But listen. How are they feeling? Ask them to explain the problem they're having as they see it. This all starts really early, and we'll talk about some of the ways to increase your ability to talk with your child, but make sure that you're asking questions, clarify. Do I hear you right? Is this what you're saying? Listen to what they have to say, understand, and then respond and validate their perspective. Not what you think their perspective should be. Right? I think a lot of times as adults we listen, and we listen to fix, not listen to understand. Right? If your child is in an emotionally difficult state, we want to be listening to understand. Because only then can we actually try to help. Right? But if we just kind of gloss over it, or we just try to throw solutions at the problem and we're not really hearing what our teenagers have to say to us, then we're not teaching them how to deal with that emotional pain, and they may seek to relieve it elsewhere. So, I have a toddler at home, and I've known this for my entire career, but he needs to be taught literally everything. And that's a real good reminder for me as a mental health provider that everybody needs to be taught the things that we've learned, right? And that includes teenagers. Teenagers need to be taught how to handle emotions as part of a healthy development. They need to be taught that ignoring problems doesn't make them go away. And they need to be taught that it's okay and encouraged to talk with a trusted adult when something is going on. That includes encouraging their friends to talk with an adult, or to, in some situations, talk to an adult for their friends. But this is the way that we can help them to learn to manage that emotional pain and difficulty that they're in. And when I say emotional pain, that can be as simple as just, hey, I'm really stressed out because I've got 2 AP classes and I'm behind. That's emotional pain, right? I mean, I don't like it when I'm behind on work at work. It's difficult. I learn how to cope and I manage it. But a teenager balancing a heavy course load, maybe a first job, maybe a girlfriend problem or a boyfriend problem, that's really, really hard, even if it doesn't sound that hard. And we have to help them and teach them how to deal with that so that they don't turn to running from it. And a big way that teens tend to run from their challenges is using substances. Courage to Speak talks about parenting styles in these 4 ways. They talk about authoritarian, indulgent, indifferent, and authoritative. We're going to unpack a little bit of that so that you can think about your own parenting style and how it may or may not impact how you talk to your child and how they see you. So we start by talking about the indifferent parent. So the indifferent parent is sort of described as no love or boundaries. They don't show a lot of affection, they don't nurture, they don't draw strong boundaries. And what this tends to teach, whether purposefully or not, probably not purposefully, is self-centeredness. And that love, affection, and attention can be inconsistent in relationships. And what a teen can learn from that is insecurity, confusion, low self-worth, feeling unloved. The sort of absolute extreme opposite of the indifferent parent is the indulgent parent. And this is a parent that just heaps on affection and doesn't draw any boundaries, but they don't draw any boundaries as they're giving. And on one hand, that might sound really great if you're a teenager, you're never told no. But they get whatever they want, they don't have to earn it, they don't have to work for anything, they don't have to engage appropriately, they just get everything. There's no consequences, they either don't exist or they, in a moment of, oh my God, I can't believe you're doing that, they put on something that's totally unenforceable. There's no limits or boundaries. An indulgent parent, really, their focus is they want to be the pal. They want to be a friend. They want to be well-liked by their child. And that's important. You want to be well-liked by your child. But you want to do it in the context of boundaries, right? A parent often in this situation might fear that their teenager is going to become angry or won't love them. In this situation, teens can become self-centered and irresponsible, and they don't learn important skills to deal with real-life situations. Now, we also don't want parents to just be an authoritarian all the time. You can't do this, you can't do that, there's no way you can do that, I'm not allowing you to do this. There's no real affection, there's just all boundary. And these are situations where parents don't listen to their child or try to understand. And children, typically of authoritarian parents, interpret strict adherence to rules as, and this lack of understanding and communication is not being valued and not being loved. They learn that communication is not really an important part of being in a family. In this situation, the teen tends to learn resistance, rebellion, and I'm never going to live up to the expectations. Because in this situation, the expectations are just so high. It's impossible. So the encouraged to speak describes the authoritative parent as a parent that has boundaries and love in an appropriate ratio, right? Realistic expectations, age-appropriate boundaries, consequences and responsibilities being part of an important or part of a loving parent-child relationship. An authoritative parent will listen to their child and their feelings and will support them to effectively manage their feelings. In a situation like this, a child is going to learn more about respect and responsibility. They're going to learn that their actions can have consequences. And they're going to learn that they can talk to their parents about difficult situations. Because really that's what we want. We want our teens to come to us and talk to us when they're having a hard time. So, what can parents do? It can sometimes feel like not a lot, especially if you're listening to these descriptions of parents and you're going, oh man, I'm way too authoritarian. Or, oh man, I'm way too indulgent. Well, here's the thing. You can stop that. You can open conversation. Might take help, might take work. But the most important thing is to start to learn how to be an active listener. And again, I'm here to tell you that you don't have to wait. In fact, please don't wait until your child is a teenager to start actively listening. These patterns are best started as early as possible. But know that teens and youth in general are more willing to work with parents and be open with them when their feelings are acknowledged. So as an active listener, you want to listen and seek to understand before you're trying to make yourself understood, right? Confirm what you've heard them say. Give your child your undivided attention when you're listening to them talk to you, right? We're all guilty of being on our phones or watching TV or trying to multitask, but if your child comes to you and they say they want to talk to you about something, that's a good signal to put everything down and listen. Look them in the eye. Hear them. Repeat back to them. Rephrase what they're saying. Is this what I'm hearing? So that they know that you're trying to understand them. At the same time, as you're doing all of these things, right, you're reflecting back, you're observing, you also want to invite conversation at times when you might not be able to look at your child, right? I talk a lot about the incidental moments, right? You're doing dishes, you're driving in the car, right? Sometimes it's easier for people to be vulnerable and open when they don't have to look their parent in the eye, but you're still trapped in the same moving vehicle. Right? There's a lot of really good conversations that happen because there's nowhere to go. So you can just talk. But while you're doing that, you're still using those same principles of active listening. You're still repeating back. You're still rephrasing. You're still asking, do I have this right? Is this what I'm hearing? Because you want your child to discuss with you what's going on in their life. When it comes to drug issues and alcohol issues and substances and really any difficult conversation, kids are more likely to talk about that when they feel like it's not forced, but has come up naturally. So you want to look for teachable moments, right? You're watching TV together and something comes up. Hey, you know anything about that? That's a valid question. You're driving down the street and you pass the vape store. You ever been in there? Do you know anybody that goes in there? What is that store? It invites a conversation without being super intimidating, right? Ask about what they're learning in health class. Invite the conversation. You want to make sure that the only time you're talking about substances with your child is not when you're forcing it because of an issue. You want this conversation to start long before they come home from a party and you suspect that they drank alcohol, or you suspect that they were doing other things, other substances. You want this conversation to start as early as elementary school. Hey, what do you know about drugs? What did you learn about this? What did you learn about that? Start those conversations. And remember that once is not enough. And you want to make sure that you're talking about the dangers of using substances early and how that's risky, right? You also want to make sure that you're very clear in your expectations, right? A teenager should know that their parent has expectations that they will not be using substances. As your child gets older, you also want to make sure that you are doing your due diligence to update and expand your own knowledge about what's out there, what's happening. Go to parent meetings, talk to your peers, read, listen. Because you have to remember that kids are faced every single day with redeciding whether they're going to use alcohol and other drug use or other drugs. Every single day. They have the opportunity to follow a peer out the door during their free period, or agree to go to a friend's house whose parents aren't around, which has lots of temptations, right? Every single day, there's the opportunity for a kid to make a decision that could alter the path of their life. Have these conversations over and over and over again. And also know your teen's friends. You really want to get to know them. You want to invite people to your house. You also should probably be trying to get to know your teen's friends' parents, because you want to know do these people share our values? And it's okay if you don't have the exact same values, but the value that you want to share is the expectation that they're not using substances together, right? An easy way to spend time around your teens' friends, especially younger teens and middle schoolers even, is be the driver. Offer to bring people. The kids are all going to go to the center? Great, we'll drive. We'll drop you off, we'll pick you up. It'll make you popular as a parent because you're going to bring kids places, but you also get an opportunity to know who they're hanging out with, right? Host people at your house. Chaperone events. Be present. Lots and lots of teenagers like to party. They like to go to each other's houses. They like to get together, listen to music, dance, etc. The problem is teen parties also often come along with substances. So you want to make sure if your child is talking about going to a party, and hopefully they're open enough with you that they are telling you that that's what's happening, you want to make sure that it's going to be supervised. Make sure that there's no alcohol and drugs on board. When your kid comes home, be awake. Make them say goodnight to you. Hug them. Smell them. Be present. But you know what's funny is when I say contact the parents where the party is going to be held to make sure that it's going to be properly supervised, as a parent, that may feel intrusive or embarrassing or challenging, but if you're an adult and you're feeling embarrassed about checking up on what your kid's going to do, imagine what it's like to be a kid trying to make those same decisions without the benefit of worrying about your child, without the benefit of being a full-grown adult, right? These are the kinds of things that kids are wrestling with when they're trying to decide whether they're going to go to a party or not, right? I also know, I'm not naive, I also know that most of the kids that are partying are probably not going to somebody's house to party, they're going to the woods, or they're going to the basement of a store, or what have you, in town, right? But your child is less likely to go there if you're talking to them about your expectations, and you know their friends, and you are helping them to make those decisions from early on. So that by the time they get to the point of, hey, this party's happening at, so-and-so place, they've already had the decision in themselves where they value not going and putting themselves in those situations. But it's really important, I think this be awake piece is also really important, because you shouldn't be assuming that your child's coming home safely and on time and just trust that that's going to happen, right? I want you to have a trusting relationship with your child, but I also want you to verify that they're doing what they say they're doing, right? Make sure that they're coming home. And when they come home, ask them about what they were up to. Have a conversation with them. Hug them. Talk to them. Be present with them. The other thing that makes being a parent today really, really challenging is electronic devices. Right? And the reason why this is relevant to drug and alcohol use is because it's how kids connect with each other. It's how they get messages about substances. It's how they experience the culture, right? For better or for worse, most teenagers experience the world at least partially through the lens of their phone, right? So understand how they use their phone. Understand how they use social media. You should know your child's username on social media platforms. Probably you should follow them. Probably you should know that they might have another account. Talk to them about that. Expect that they don't. Know that they might. Whenever possible, use things like parental controls and protective software. But you have to understand that bullying, pro-drug use information, pornography, the internet is like a fire hose, and it puts kids in vulnerable situations because they are not necessarily equipped to filter these things in the same way that an adult will be. We talked at the beginning about prescription drugs and abuse. Monitor, secure, and properly dispose of medications. Make sure you know how many pills are in each of your bottles. Take prescription medicine out of common areas and keep it in a place you know about. If you don't need the rest of a prescription, discard it. Use a drug take-back day. Kelly probably from the town probably has information on a drug take-back day with her today. It's April 22nd. There's a drug take-back day. If you have prescription medicine that you're not using, get rid of it that way. But really make sure also that your relatives are locking things up and discarding things appropriately. The slide highlights grandparents because sometimes they're not paying attention to these things, not because they don't care, but because they might not realize the danger. If you feel your teen can be trusted, make sure they know. Because that means a lot to a teenager to be trusted. But if you don't in a situation, make sure they know why. Talk to them about what is going on and what has happened that helped you to lose that trust. You want to outline the current problem, express what you believe, and express what you believe that they can do to earn that trust back. And it's really important that teens get the message that you love them unconditionally. Parents, not pals. Don't give your power away. Okay? I mean, I know that's a silly picture, but the reality is that's what it can feel like for a teenager or a young person without healthy boundaries. Help teens overcome peer pressure with refusal skills. You want them to practice. You want to talk with them. You want to have them have confidence in the way that they avoid drugs and unhealthy choices. When I talk to teenagers a lot of time, I tell teenagers on their own to come up with their own sort of code of ethics and their own sort of boundaries. This is what I will do and what I don't do. That should happen with a parent in the context of a loving parent relationship. But a child, a teen, can learn how to confidently say, no, I don't do that kind of stuff. And it doesn't have to be about like, oh, I don't do that. It's just like, no, it's just not me. And the more you talk with them and the more you help them develop their personal kind of code of ethics and it becomes who they are, the more comfortable they are sharing that. And the more their friends will know that's who they are. Right? I talk to teens about that all the time. And at first, they sometimes say to me like, oh, nobody's going to care that I have a code. Nobody's going to care that that's who I am. But you know what? People do actually learn to respect people who hold true to who they are. But it comes with practice. And that confidence doesn't come from a vacuum. That confidence comes from connection and care from the adults in their lives. If you want to try to work to teach refusal skills with your child, you want to ask them to come up with situations that are likely to happen with them. Let them come up with their own responses. Allow them to use you as an excuse. And realistically, help them to understand that if they have friends that are using, the last thing that that friend needs is somebody to use with them. What they really need is a support. And I want to say, the earlier slides that were talking about drug use as really being a pain-based behavior, I do really believe that, but I also believe that when a teenager makes the decision to pick up a substance, it's not often, or it may not always be, overtly about relieving that pain. It's just that it makes them more vulnerable, right? Stress makes us more vulnerable to making wrong decisions, right? And so, I don't want to say to a teenager, you're using because you're in pain. I want to say to a teenager, is everything going okay? How's it going? What's your stress like? What's this happening? What's that happening? And help them to understand that when they are in that spot, they are more vulnerable to making these decisions. And so that's when they need to rely on these skills and this confidence that you've talked about with them in the context of your loving relationship. As a parent, you also want to make sure that you make your role clear, right? You want to emphasize that their health and safety is your responsibility. For a teenager, that's really hard to understand sometimes because a teenager developmentally is trying to individuate from the family. They're trying to go out on their own. They don't want anybody to be responsible for them. But as a parent, you know that this is a critical time in their development. They need to know that they can trust you to do whatever's necessary to protect them. And that sometimes, that's not going to be what they want you to do. But it's what you're going to do because you love them and care for them. You also need them to know that if at any point you do suspect that they're using, you're going to investigate that. And you're not going to let it lie. Practice prevention. Medical checkups. Check their personal spaces on occasion. Now, I'm not necessarily advocating, in fact, I don't think you should go through your teenager's room and search. Right? But maybe, if they're responsible for their own laundry, surprise them. Do their laundry for a day and put it away. If they respond by losing it because you went into their space, that's grounds for a conversation at minimum about what may or may not be going on. Because why are you so secretive about what's happening in your room? Right? If you go in and search, obviously that's going to cause, searching somebody's room is going to cause even somebody who's not using to get defensive because nobody wants their space violated. But if their response to somebody doing something nice for them is, how dare you go in my room? That's grounds for at least a conversation and some suspicion. On occasion, confirm their whereabouts, right? Like that's what I was talking about. You know, you ask for money because they want to go to the movies and get an ice cream afterwards. Okay, great. Maybe that's a good day to go out to dinner in the center and happen to walk by the ice cream store around the end of the movie, right? You don't have to be snooping on them. You're out to dinner. But you got eyes that your kid is where they're supposed to be. I'm going to be proactive. I think I've stressed this a few times, but don't wait until you suspect that your child might be using. Have these conversations earlier and often, early and often. I have a handout about the 40 developmental assets that are the building blocks for healthy development. Take a look at these and foster them in your teens, right? If you notice that there are spots where you feel like, you know what, maybe they aren't as connected with things outside of them, or maybe they're not showing, I wish I had the developmental assets in front of me right now because I'm drawing a blank, but if you're seeing any in there where you see deficits, think about ways that you can increase those. Think about ways that you can connect your child to more activities outside of the home. Connect them to more activities that are bigger than them. Community service, religious institutions, sports teams. Those connections are really important in the healthy development of your children. Another thing that you can do to increase connection within your family is as often as possible, have dinner together. Leave your phones in the other room, leave the TV off, however you want to do it, but come together as a family and talk and be connected. It's good for development across the board to be together with your family, but it's also good for knowing what's happening in your child's life, and it's good for making them feel connected to your family. 3 out of 4 teens say that their parent is the most influential person in their life. Use that power. Have those conversations. I think that I've said, have the conversation at least 60 times in the last 45 minutes. Because if there's anything that you take from this presentation, it's have the conversation. Because you do have power in your child's life. Even if you think your relationship is not in a good place, you can get it to a good place by starting to have the conversation. Ask the questions. Be connected. Engage. If you feel like the relationship is damaged or you've made mistakes, get help. There's therapy available. Family therapists do not have to be just for crisis. They can be just for reopening lines of communication. And again, that communication is the primary way that you're going to know what's happening in your child's life. At this point, I've kind of finished the slides. Does anybody have any questions? It's very quiet this evening. Again, I'll say, and then I won't say it again, have the conversation, ask the question, be connected, know what's out there, know your kids' friends, invite them in. Enjoy your teenager. Because really, that's going to go further than anything else. Love them, know who they are, and enjoy them so that they know that they're connected to you. And that is the best way that you can protect them and help them to make positive decisions in their life. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris, for that was really informative. And we are going to wrap up the live stream. And if people in the audience would just stay for a few minutes just to talk through a little bit what we heard. I think it would be really interesting, especially to hear from you all, you students. So yeah, let's do that right now. So thanks for coming to our live stream and watching the recording, and we'll wrap up with the discussion.